Return of the Blossoming Blade, or if you want to be technical, the Return of the MANHWA sect. Now, this is a Murim manhwa. Now, there's like levels of manhwa. Last time I talked about a manhwa, like a regular manhwa, and this time I'm talking about a Murim manhwa. Now, Murim is essentially similar to Wuxiao. Wuxiao is the Chinese version of fantastical ancient. So if you think about it, it's sort of like mythology, right? But this is sort of the Korean version of that, where instead of it being about magic and spirit energy and stuff like that, it's very close to magic, but it's more so about martial arts, like the spiritual martial arts, not the magical martial arts, the spiritual martial arts. That's sort of what Murim is usually about. But there's loads of Murim, and Murim is usually where the really well thought out stories are. You would get some crazy shit out of Murim, but a lot of the well written stories come out of Murim. Infinite Leveling Up Murim, Nano Machine, The Legend of the Northern Blade. These are the three that I know as like my top Murim, right? They're really great. But this one, this in particular, The Return of the Blossoming Blade or the MANHWA sect, is one of, if not my favorite way of telling an overpowered character's story. Okay, firstly, this is one of those return stories, right? So where they lived a life and returned to the past, or reincarnated again. Not isekai, reincarnated, because he hasn't gone to another world in the story. He just reincarnated into a later point in time, like 100 years after his original death. He was originally a genius at martial arts, and then he used that genius that he understood in his past life and, applied it to the present day, right? But it's a typical overpowered main character story, right? You have a lot of those in the Return series, in the Murim series, in the MANHWA series. It's always they have a lot of overpowered main character stories. This one in particular takes a nice spin to it. I love when the Murim manhwas and regular manhwas take the overpowered main character and do a nice spin with it. Usually they don't do very well with it, but this one did something very interesting. The one thing I'm talking about is what happened in a later arc. Now, for those who haven't read it, I would recommend reading this, even though you might think, oh my god, it's just about another overpowered main character. I'm sick of those types of stories. I am too. I've read thousands of them. But there's always gems somewhere in the rough. This is one of those gems. I would highly recommend reading it. For those who have read it and know what arc I'm talking about, I'm talking about the Immortal Blade arc. I'm saying Immortal Blade, but there's a lot of other bloody names for it. Essentially, it's about the one where they're trying to get that immortal pill. The pill that gives like a ton of energy. They want to get the manual and the pills for it, right? And they went to this graveyard, the sword graveyard for it, and then try to get it. Now, this is what happens after that. The sword graveyard was such an interesting idea. They were trying, you would think it's just a regular graveyard, which they're going to now, all the Murim warriors that exist in that realm that are martial artists that are not martial artists. Do you understand this, right? There are two different worlds within Murim. There's the martial artists in the Murim world, and then there's the non-martial artists, okay? And they're always separated from each other. If you're not part of this martial art world, they won't go after you. If you don't really practice martial arts, you're an ordinary citizen. If you, as a martial artist, are attacking ordinary citizens, you're considered evil in that world, so it's justifiable to kill you. It's how it works. Sort of like the olden way of old Chinese or ancient China or ancient Japan, how that used to work, where if you, as someone who practices martial arts, are attacking someone, you would be considered an evil person in that world of martial arts. But the whole point was that in this sword graveyard is supposed to be the immortal medicine guy that did the most powerful medicines, and his manuscript is within his grave. This is where it is, and we gotta go raid his grave and get that, right? That was sort of the idea, and they did go after it. Everyone went, and then it was just a hogwash, right? It was a trick to lead people into their deaths because there was literally nothing there. Everyone wanted that thing. They all fought each other, killed each other. There was a lot of killing. Even the main characters, some of them very young, had their first kills during this and are not used to killing. Our main character is, because he's like, he returned from his previous life, so he's killed before. But there was a lot of killing in this little grave robbery. But there was nothing there. The Medicine Immortal, that's the word he's called. The Medicine Immortal was tricked everybody into coming in here, right? It was traps everywhere. There was Jenksi everywhere. There was traps. It was basically a trapped dungeon. There was nothing at the end. It was to lure people in and have them go into their deaths. The only reason they survived is because of the main character's, ballsiness, right? But they were wondering, why would he do that, right? Does he have something against martial artists? What was the point of the sword graveyard, right? And so, as the main characters were leaving this the place where they were staying at, they were thinking about this, and the main character was also like pondering, why would he make this graveyard? And then he starts to understand, because he's starting to think exactly like the Medicine Immortal, where he starts to relate to him. And now, this is the most insane way of telling a genius character, right? A character that's overpowered. The Medicine Immortal was like our main character, very overpowered. He was excellent at martial arts. He was excellent at making medicine. He was the top of the top. He was a massive genius, right? And he proved it both in making medicine and in martial arts. He proved it all. The problem here is he was so above everybody else that he believed everyone else was stupid, right? No one was worthy of his skills, to pass on his skills. He didn't feel like anybody was worthy to pass on his skills, and he didn't have the mindset to teach anybody to pass on said skills, right? Because he's a genius. What does he need to teach anybody else? He doesn't need to teach anybody. He's the genius. He can, carry everybody, right? That arrogance of a genius. He's smarter, he's better, and he can fight better as everybody else. That's sort of like his idea. That's what he was going with, right? And that's the same thing as the main character. He has this epiphany. Because in his original life, he wasn't the sect leader. He wasn't a teacher. He was just the genius of the sect. He couldn't keep the sect alive because there was nothing, he didn't have to, right? The sect was at its top. But when he got reborn, again, the sect fell. It was 100 years later after his sect was, after he died. His sect went into rubbles. They're at the bottom of the barrel. They don't even exist. That's why it's called like the Return of the Blossoming Blade, the Return of MANHWA sect. And so his sect was at the bottom of the barrel, right? And so how are you going to bring back a sect? As a genius, you love the sect, but how are you going to bring them back into their former glory if you're a genius and as alone, essentially? How are you going to bring back your sect into its prominent glory as a genius? You are a genius. I can do it alone. Can I do it alone? You can't. And you have to teach the younger generation. You gotta teach. You can't do it all alone, so you teach the ones who don't know how to do it, right? This is the thing that the Medicine Immortal did not have. Even though you are as powerful as you are, you are as omnipotent as you are, you still can't do it alone. You can't run a sect alone. You can't bring a sect to former glory by yourself. And that's the one thing the Medicine Immortal failed to do as a genius. He understood that because he was the exact same person. Our main character was the exact same person as the Medicine Immortal. He has no legacy. The Medicine Immortal also does not. The only thing he left behind his legacy in a place only people who understood him would be able to find it. But he never put into factor the people that would understand him, whether that person would be a good person or a bad person, someone with evil intentions or someone with good intentions. He never put that into a factor. He only put into a factor that they would be as boss and genius as he is. He didn't have a disciple. He didn't have someone to pass on his legacy to because he didn't feel as though everybody else was on his level. No one could reach his level. There was no point in teaching somebody else to get to his level. It's a genius way of telling that even though you're a genius, even though you're as powerful as you are, you cannot leave anything behind. You cannot escape death. And he understood this. The main character understood because he reincarnated. He died, yes, but he eventually reincarnated, right? And then the sect that he was a part of is at the bottom, and now he has to bring that sect back to his throne of glory, but he cannot do that by himself. He understood this, and with this understanding, in the later chapters, he starts to actually teach them. He starts to make the people that are at the highest in his sect at the moment get even more powerful. He's already at the top. He can fight an elder of another sect, but they cannot. And so he's going to teach them slowly so that everyone in his sect is geniuses and not just himself. That is like the most genius way of showing overpowered main characters not being that overpowered. He's overpowered, but he's alone, right? There's nothing you can do by creating to push up an organization. You can't push up an organization by yourself. You have to have others, but those others cannot just be weaklings. They gotta be as boss as you, and that's why that dichotomy between him and the medicine immortal and the main character was like going back and forth, and it was a really long chapter going into like poetic discussions on how this all works, and that how his thought process was, right? And the main character thinks the medicine immortal was stupid. Do not take on a disciple, because he realized that he was the same in his original life. He didn't consider anybody on his level. He didn't even consider the factor of teaching anybody to get on his level, because they couldn't understand his genius. He's just that genius. No one can understand me, you know? And so that's why he didn't even bother teaching the rest of his sect. He didn't even want to do such a thing. That was one of the one reasons why there is no legacy of him. He doesn't exist in records. His sect leader does. His friend that was a sect leader, he exists in records. But he does not, because he didn't even bother to spread that genius of his to others, that understanding of his. And that even as a genius, it's brought up in a later chapter where the elder he fought realized that he's such a danger, right? But then another elder was telling this one elder, it's a bit confusing just saying elders, I don't know any of their names, it's all Korean names and they're so bloody confusing in Murum's. Point is, he was telling him that even if he's a genius, it's not an issue if he's in that rundown sect. Because how can he, unless he has the understanding of that the whole sect needs to be as strong as he is, if he doesn't have that understanding, there's no point in worrying about a genius that will rot away with a rotting sect. You know, that's the kind of understanding that they have. Because it's like, what can you do as a genius on your own? Right? You're a genius, but you can't do it by yourself. You can't lift a sect all by yourself. You can't fight everybody by yourself. You're gonna leave nothing behind. You're just going to die off with nothing to show for. There's no legacy left behind, and that's sort of a very interesting level of dichotomy in the Muram Manhwa of all things. But this is the thing with Muram Manhwa. There's another one in Infinite Level Muram. I'll do a video on that one because a lot of Muram Manhwas like deserve a video of their own. They're so good in the way they're telling their stories, the way that they characterize their characters. They're all really well introspected. It's so good, and the way they do like fights. And the different martial arts styles and the way they work and mash on each other. One is stronger than the other. It's not like one has a bigger dick than the other one. No, it's more like they are going at it, you know. They are putting all their skills and techniques to the test against each other, and they're making it work. It's so bloody good. That's why I really love Return of the Blossoming Blade. It's a really high recommend. I definitely check out Return of the Blossoming Blade or The Return of the MANHWA.